I think it's ready. This took me forever to figure out. I am not very tech savvy. So I'm just going to get started. My name is Emma Schaefer. I'm a junior communications major, and this is my final presentation. And I decided to do my project over part 2 of our textbook, which is about entering the workplace. So what is this section all about? So I kind of thought a lot about how I wanted to sum up some of the sections or the chapters, because it's a little bit difficult because they're a little bit different in what they're talking about. I would say chapter 4, which is more about like resumes, interviewing, and prepping you for the workplace. It's much different than the second section where it kind of jumps into, okay, now you have the job. This is what you need to know about how to work with all these different people. So, kind of what I thought about would be the best way to sum it up. I said it gives us the tools to better our chances of getting a job, and once we do, how can we assimilate into the culture of the workplace effectively? So, really, kind of here's how we can help you get a job, and once you do, here's how we're going to help you talk to people effectively and make good choices and be more inclusive and have a diverse culture, all those types of things. So chapter 4 is titled Resumes, Interviews, and Negotiation. And for me, I think this is where I learned a little bit more, and it was kind of unexpected for me because I always kind of thought I was like, this was something I was good at, was this portion necessarily, maybe. And for the resume specifically, it definitely had a big impact on my resume. I thought that my resume was pretty good coming into this class. I had one of my friends who's a design student help me like format it so it looked all pretty. And it wasn't until like after we submitted our resumes and got them back that I realized I had like a major no-no, or maybe it wasn't that major, but I put the like references available upon request, which I realized, oh, you don't need to do, like they already know that. And definitely I learned more about kind of catering your resume to be more specific to what you're applying to. I think this is a little more difficult the younger you are because you have less to add on there, and the things that you have on there are a little less impressive than someone who's 30 years old and has a lot more experience. I think I had something silly on mine, like some sort of Spanish award and like 10-year 4-H member, because when I got right out of high school, that was pretty much all I had for my awards section. And then I also learned more about how like having your hobbies on there, you don't need that. Like your awards, unless they're good and relevant, like don't put them on there. It looks silly. So I definitely, since reading this chapter a second time after getting a grade back for my resume, I definitely have changed up my resume a little bit. I still think it looks good, but I think it's a little more relevant and professional and catered more to a more of a big girl job, if you'd say, and less like, oh, I need this to get a job in an ice cream shop, you know? So that's definitely how it changed my resume from a perspective of someone who thought they had a good resume beforehand, I guess. So interviews, the interview portion, I kind of was in this position where I thought I was pretty good with interviews. I'm typically pretty good with talking to people. I did theater and musical theater in high school, so I've always felt okay and pretty comfortable talking around people because I viewed interview as like putting up the best version of yourself, which is almost like a performance almost. So I always thought, oh, I could do this, and my mom helped me a lot when I was younger with practice interviews. So I felt pretty confident. And then when I read more about the interview portion, I definitely realized there were some pointers that I needed. And especially when we went and had our practice interviews, I got some really, really good feedback. I got a lot of positive feedback, and she also helped me learn more about when they're asking those situational questions. Always make sure you are like putting yourself in a good light and you're not like saying, oh, this is something bad that these people did. You don't want to include yourself in that. And she told me about how it's okay to use like I and me, and not necessarily, I don't always have to use we, which we is a really great inclusive word, but at the same time, you're interviewing for yourself, which was a good tip that she gave me, that is something that I didn't even realize I was doing a lot. And then for the negotiation kind of section and other sections of the chapter, these are obviously the main three, but with negotiation and some of the other things that are talked about in that chapter that were kind of newer territory for me. With negotiation specifically, I knew that that was a thing, like negotiating your salary and whatnot, but that was all I knew. Like, I knew it was a thing, but I definitely learned more about how to negotiate and to negotiate in appropriate and professional manners. You can't just say, oh, I'm like, oh, that's not enough for a salary, things like that. How about how to be professional in context and professional in the way that you're speaking and negotiating about it. Okay, so chapter 5 was titled Getting to Know Your Diverse Workplace. So the thing that I took away from this chapter most specifically was kind of using keys in a real manner. So keys obviously being knowing yourself, evaluating your professional context, your communication interaction with others, step back and reflect. I mean, these are all very important in all different facets of life, especially knowing yourself, evaluating your professional context. But I believe for this chapter, the one that I think is most valuable here and the ones to consider the most would be the Y and S steps of keys. So your communication interaction with others, and also step back and reflect. Knowing how to communicate with everyone despite differences that you may have and things like that. It's really important to be able to communicate with everyone because that's our entire world. Our whole world is diverse, and let alone a workplace, which is diversity is great in a workplace just like it is in the world. So we need to be able to communicate with people effectively despite all of those differences or whatnot that we may have that some people have an issue with, and we need to learn to be more loving, caring, accepting people, obviously, but everyone knows that. And then also step back and reflect. It's really important to step back from conversations and think, oh, that was a good positive conversation that we discussed what we needed to and we are moving on to a better and brighter type of thing. You don't want to leave your conversations in a negative tone, but with one that seems, oh, how can we move on and move bigger from this? Okay, so what I took from this section, kind of my takeaways. Definitely about changing my resume, catering my resume to how it is valuable to me and the different ways that I will be interviewing or using it. And also prepping for interviews. I never prepped for interviews before this, but now I think I have some tips and kind of more advice on how to prepare for those interviews in order to put myself in the best light and in the best chance of doing well with the interview. And obviously the keys approach, which obviously not just from this section, but from the whole textbook, the whole semester, is really kind of a great little tool. And it's not difficult to remember either, which is nice. And it's a good way to just mentally check with yourself. And I think that's something I'll be taking from this class in this section. And also the idea of negotiation and when it's appropriate. Okay, so importance, how do I plan to use this in my life? This is kind of why I think it's important. I think it's important because I think it's very applicable in everyone's lives, and specifically for me, I am planning on taking kind of what I've learned with interviewing specifically into Camp Kesem, which is an amazing organization. We host week-long summer camps for kids who've been affected by their parents' cancer. And it's a non-for-profit nationwide organization. We're one of 4 campuses, or 4 chapters at different campuses in Indiana, and we have over 100 chapters nationwide. And we're non-for-profit, so we send all of our kids to camp completely free of charge. And one of the big things that I'm doing this year is I've been lucky enough to be on the coordination board. And I'm the volunteer coordinator. So kind of one of my jobs this year is recruiting new members and also interviewing members that apply to be counselors for our summer camps. And so that's kind of new for me. This will be kind of my first time on the other side of an interview, and I'm going to be interviewing a ton of people. So what I've learned with interviewing and kind of being more acquainted with the interview process will be really useful to me. And then also just interviewing in of itself for myself specifically, kind of outside of the class to get what I consider a big girl job is really important and really valuable, and something, especially for something that I thought I was okay with, knowing how I can make it even better and even more impactful is really useful, and I'm really thankful for what I learned in this course. Thanks, guys.